our writer, Hanff Korelitz, and Kate Brosnan have arrived. I'm Dick Burns. I'm a member of the Nantucket Book Festival Committee, and it's my pleasure to introduce this morning's writer. Welcome to you all. If this is your first event, well, very much welcome. We're so pleased to be still around after 10 years, and very happy to have the audience we have. This morning, Hanff Korelitz, the author of, the author of The Latecomer, will be interviewed by Kate Brosnan, who is co-founder, co-director of the Nantucket Project. The novel they'll be talking about is Jean's latest, her 8th, and it's an engaging, complex work that deals with a family of Jewish New Yorkers who, among them, feature 3 triplets. And the triplets form really the heart of the story, but the story is a family story that seems to be about 2 generations, but there are reasons that it comes to feel like maybe 3 generations. It's replete with engaging commentary through the interaction of the characters about racism, about wealth and privilege, and about families, especially. And it's a book that's marked by terrific writing and great construction. The 3 triplets are sort of like planets that scatter and are drawn together again, finally, by gravity. And the gravity, of course, is love. So would you please welcome Jean and Kate. Thank you.
We got to figure out the technology here.
Are these on? So wait, I think.
Is mine on? Ooh, yeah.
And how about mine? Ooh. Hi, Jean.
Hi, Kate. Nice to meet you.
It's so nice to meet you, too. I was telling Jean that I read both of her books back to back.
And that's how they were written, so.
Yeah, because you had stopped writing The Latecomer to do the plot.
Right.
And the thing that jumped out at me, and just because I had the opportunity to read them back to back, which I usually don't do, there seemed to be an ongoing thing that jumped out at me as like, we're sick as our secrets.
Huh. Yeah.
And that a lot of your characters are, they're really not letting their truth shine. And I think it keeps a lot of them from the human connection. Can you tell me how you'd react to that? Because that's really what struck me.
I learned a long time ago that it was up to other people to tell me what my work was about. I once had a friend in England who read a poem that I'd written about my dad and I digging up old bottles from the hill behind our house in Westchester, and he said, oh, this is about 2 generations of Jews digging up concentration camp victims. And I was like, it is? And then I read it again, and I was like, oh my God, it is. So it's hard enough to write a book. To write it and know what it's about seems like too hard.
So interesting. I thought that you would intentionally.
No.
Okay, moving along.
I feel like it's above my bandwidth to have the kind of meta understanding of what I'm doing. In fact, you could say that it's crucial to lack an understanding of what you're doing in order
and just let it come.
To get it done.
Just let it come.
So, yeah.
Dick talked a lot about The Latecomer, but I wanted to also bring in the plot.
Right.
In writing the plot, I had read, when I was doing my research on you, that you really wrote this for other authors, because there's always the fear of plagiarism.
Yeah, I do have a theory about this. I am far from the only writer who has written about plagiarism in sort of many different forms, outright copying of text, everything from the influence of another person's story, or maybe helping yourself to a story that's not yours in the strictest sense, and what the moral obligations are there, if there are any. And I've always read these novels, and I think the reason we're so obsessed with plagiarism is that deep down we're afraid that we're doing it. Not in the, I'm going to copy and paste this thing and put it in my manuscript, but we're writers because we're readers, and most of us have been readers since we could read, and that's decades of stuff in there rattling around. And when it comes out onto the page, onto the screen, whatever, we don't always have that comfortable feeling of purity about what comes out. I've written many sentences in my life that I've thought, did I write that, or am I remembering that sentence? And this image is familiar to me, and you stare at it for a while and you think, well, I'm just going to leave it there, and if I still have that bad feeling, I'll just change the sentence. But it's harder when it's an idea, because after all, the using and the reusing and the interaction between ideas is essential to making fiction, like it is to making any art. So there's a lot of uncertainty. We're walking over very, very dodgy territory. And I think the fear is where the fascination comes from. So.
Well, I'm just assuming that everyone's read the plot because it was such a hit. But the story is of Jake.
But that doesn't mean we're going to give anything away.
Right, right. No, we're not going to give anything away.
No spoilers here.
But Jake is a teacher.
Yes.
Has a student who he is teaching who's kind of arrogant, very arrogant,
yeah,
not kind
jerk.
of.
Yeah.
And tells him the idea that he has for a book that is going to be a major, major hit, and he knows
according to him.
According to him. And Jake, the teacher, goes, yeah, you and everybody else.
Yeah, right. But then in private, not in the class, not in front of anybody else, but in a private conference, he gives up the plot, and to Jake's deep chagrin, because he is himself unable to write. He's sort of choked out 2 novels, but he's tapped out. He has got nothing. And here comes this arrogant piece of whatever coming in and saying, oh, I don't need y'all because what I'm writing is going to make me rich and famous, which is something we hear a lot.
Right, I'm sure.
And we say, oh, that's very happy for you.
Right.
Yeah, right. Call me when it's when it's
done.
But in this case, he listens to this plot, and his heart just sinks, because here this guy is going to walk away with the big prize, and he resigns himself to that, because there are rules about these things. And a couple of years later, he suddenly realizes that whatever happened to that book, and he does a little research, and what he discovers is that his former student is dead and has died without ever writing his book. So now it becomes a different issue, and now that this imperative that we feel when we get a really good idea, which is rare enough, a story that really desperately wants to be told, the priorities shift for him, and he says, well, I'm going to write my own book with this plot. And he does, and he becomes everything that his former student claimed that he would be.
Right? Yeah.
But he can't enjoy it because he's too scared that somebody will come out of the woodwork and point a finger at him.
Back to as sick as our secrets.
Well, that's a big one. And I have been asked, many times, well, why doesn't he just say, okay, I got this idea from? And the answer to that is, has anybody been paying attention to the world we're living in right now? This is enough to, destroy a career, destroy a life. It would end his career as a writer. He knows that. People don't, we're all human beings. We love to see other people, suffer for perceived sins. And he knows that people will not wait around to consider the subtleties of what he actually has done. It will become stole his student's story, and that's it.
you know what I was thinking? If I was him, which is, part of the fun of reading, why not say that in the beginning? I had a student who passed away. He gave me this 1 line, 2 lines about a plot, and here's how, wouldn't that have changed? Would it have relieved at least his fear?
I don't think so. I think it would have just speeded up the inevitable.
Okay.
I think if I opened a massively best-selling book, and I saw those words, I got this idea from my late student, I would say, hold on, what late student? And then I would find out that he had this student who had this brilliant idea, and the student had died, and he took it. And that would be it, and then it would be in People magazine and, trending on Twitter, and his career would be over. Listen, I watched my friend Janine Cummins be eviscerated in the space of about 4 days for, nothing over her novel, American Dirt. Okay. And this is a very real thing. I mean, I wish I were making this up.
Right.
Every writer I know is afraid right now, including me. I had a sensitivity read for the Latecomer.
Is that right?
I did.
This is the world we live in, right? It's like fear, fear, fear. Okay, so the plot, if you haven't read it, you have to read it. It's a twisty, wonderful story that I really loved reading it. I really enjoyed it, and it made me think. And I agree with you as a reader, like, what is mine, what is truly my thought, and what is truly something that I've read or heard that stuck with me. And in a lot of ways, I don't think anything's really that original.
Nothing is. I mean, greater minds than mine have determined that there are 7 plots in all. And, I'm totally comfortable with that. But it's more than that. It's not just that I don't think it's bad. I think it's good to take stories and repurpose them. I think that's what we're doing, whether we admit it or not. I myself have written 2 novels that were based on other stories. One was based on the opera Der Rosenkavalier, but it was set in New York City in the 1990s, and all the characters were Jewish. And one was based on The Scarlet Letter, but it was set in New Hampshire in the 1990s, and it was about a murder trial. So this is something that, this is a good thing.
Right.
I will not condemn somebody who, look at Ulysses. Ulysses becomes, the Odyssey becomes Ulysses. It also becomes Cold Mountain. Who wants to say goodbye to Ulysses?
Right.
Who wants to say goodbye to Cold Mountain?
Right.
So.
Let's move on to the Oppenheimer family in the Latecomer. They're such an interesting family. And I would say there's some generational shame going on here.
Oh, yeah.
And how we pass that down from generation to generation. And there's also, and I'm not sure if this was intentional or why I kept thinking about the lack of connection between triplets, because, we've often heard that if you're a twin or a triplet, you're almost thinking the same. These 3 were so different.
Yeah. Well, that's because they're not really triplets. I mean, they are children they are siblings who are made at the same time and who are randomly selected from the 4 available embryos to become the Oppenheimer triplets.
So that is a part of the plot.
Yeah.
Because, I would think sharing a womb would be, they'd come out and they'd never be separated. But they're interesting in that, and the father is carrying the secret of the accident. He was involved in it.
Which is on page 1, so we didn't ruin anything.
Okay, great. Stop me if I go too far.
Okay.
And, he's somewhat shut down, is how I would describe him. Somewhat.
I would say completely shut down, but the somewhat is you're being nice.
Yeah, I mean, he does have passion for art.
Yes.
So that part of his life is not shut down. The mom just wants to be, Harriet of Ozzie and Harriet. She just wants this loving, it's everything that she's wanted. This waiting for a child, this having 3. And she wants the picture on the hallway going up the stairs. And it's not working out for her either.
No.
And they find each other, obviously, have these 3 triplets. And I just found really refreshing that the myth of what a family is, I think that the idea that everyone in a family gets along, knows each other, is a myth.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe there are families where that happens.
Okay, name me one.
I would never dream. I think for a novelist, family is just the gift that keeps on giving.
Right.
You can write 100 novels about, and they're all about a family, and they'll be
Right.
completely different. But in this case, I'd been thinking about families, and I'd been thinking about the ways in which, really, if you think about it, every time a child is born, they're born into a different family than the previous child and the next child. And I had read this memoir by an English writer named Susie Boyd about her childhood. And she had grown up in a kind of a famously bohemian English family where they sort of spent the 60s hopping all over the world and traveling on, boats and things like that. And she was the last child, born many years later, and by the time she was born, the parents were divorced. She and her mother were living alone in a flat in London, and she had a completely different life. And when people would say to her, "Oh, I know all about your family, you did this, you did that," and she'd say, "No, that was my older sisters." And I was just thinking about that and about how assisted fertility has introduced a whole kind of other element to this and a kind of random human factor. So in this case, after years of infertility, this family produces 4 embryos, which is not exciting to them because they've been down this road before and nobody expects it to work. And the doctor takes one embryo out and saves it for the inevitable surrogacy, which is going to happen. That is going to be the child that's born. But in fact, the other 3, for some reason, are born. And the 4th child is all but forgotten about until a critical moment when their siblings are about to leave home. And the family decides to have this child. And so the question that got me going was, what has to be happening in a family for that to seem like a good idea? Just imagine your kids are leaving home. Hey, I know what we should do. Let's have a baby. No, said anybody ever, And then the other question was, what is it going to be like for that kid when they figure out what happened? And in this case, and again, not to give anything away, they really are in a very different situation than their older siblings. Hugely different situation.
And Phoebe, who is this 4th child.
The latecomer.
When it comes out, I'm as old as you are. I've just been on ice.
Right. I've been in the fridge.
I've been in the fridge.
Years.
You guys have been doing all yours. And it was like, wow, that's true.
It's, it really
exactly.
is. It really is.
I'm not giving away anything, but thank God for Phoebe.
Yeah, so the epigraph of this, sorry, I always have to say epigraph, epigram, epitaph. Epigraph of this novel is a line from C.K. Chesterton from his Father Brown stories. But do not assume that I've read the Father Brown stories. I have not. The reason that the line is so famous to me and so important to me is that it was used to great effect in the novel Brideshead Revisited. And the line is, I caught him with an unseen hook and an invisible thread that was long enough to let him wander to the edge of the earth, but still bring him back with a twitch upon the thread. And that, in Brideshead, as we all know, because we've all seen Brideshead Revisited, right?
Right.
Thank you. Is used by Evelyn Waugh to refer to religious belief. In this case, I think it really refers to family. So we wander far away, but with a twitch upon the thread, so long as the right person is doing the twitching, we come back.
Yeah, which is, she kind of, Phoebe, because I'm not sure at first I really care for her.
Right. There are plenty of people in this novel you don't really care for,
no.
I would say.
No, I mean, my heart always broke for the mom.
Harrison, come on.
Oh, Harrison.
He's an asshole.
What an arrogant, I was going to say prick, but maybe I shouldn't. And then this search also for identity. There's a real search. The other, tell me the other brother's name. I'm completely.
Loon.
He follows the Mormons off.
He tries to become a Mormon.
Yeah,
right.
he's just looking for something to fill the hole.
Right.
I mean, And Sister Sally, she gets outed as being gay. I mean, it's like, and they do that kind of all at the same time at a family picnic.
Yeah, there's this kind of picnic from hell on the beach of that other island.
Yeah, the other island.
The other island.
Right. And I'm thinking, bam.
Yeah, it's really like the worst family dinner you ever want to not go to.
But it is also the beginning of the healing of this family. It is also, once again, we're sick as we're secrets. They're all out on the table now.
Yeah.
And now we can look at them, at least I felt for them, a sense of relief. That we're not carrying around, you know, trying to show the world like Harrison, like, and Sally, I'm not what you think I am. You know, this is who I am. And I really believe that is the moment on that beach that everything starts to shift.
Yeah, there is a paragraph at the end. There are 3 sections of the novel. This comes at the end of section 2. Do not look ahead. When the book was assigned to a narrator for the audiobook version, and I am a huge audiobook person, and I was thrilled when this woman was hired because she's fantastic. She called me and we had a long talk, and she said, you know, I was reading the book and I got to this paragraph and I stood up and I just couldn't speak. And I said, I know what paragraph that was, and we had a long talk about how to handle this paragraph because it is a point where the novel just changes direction. And it's a special challenge for the narrator. And when I got the audiobook, I immediately went there and I listened to it, and I was just stunned with how brilliantly she handled it. So, yeah, I mean, just because this is a literary novel, I can't write anything without plot twists. I mean, life is too short not to have plot twists.
You're good at those.
Thank you. So actually, could I say something about how these two were kind of written stumbling over each other?
You can say whatever you want.
Thank you. So, because these are books number 7 and 8 for me, and this has never happened before. Usually, I write a book, I collapse. A year or 2 later, I have an idea, I write another book, collapse. When I finish a book, I don't have anything. I'm totally tapped out. I've got no ideas. I'll never write again. It's terrifying. And then I get an idea and I start again. That's not what happened here. So I was writing The Latecomer, and I was, I don't know if I knew I was in trouble, but I was in trouble. And my editor had left. My editor, who's a Nantucket resident, but is not here at the moment, Deb Butter, had left my publisher. She'd gone to start an imprint somewhere else. And we had an obligation to show the book to that publisher, to the publisher that she had left. They turned it down, and the verdict that came back to me through my agent was, and these 3 indelible words, if I were a tattoo person, I would put them on me somewhere, not even close. Not even close. And remember, I had an HBO show about to come out, so like that just shows you how much they hated this book. So then we took The Latecomer to my editor at her new place, and she also turned it down. But she didn't turn it down with not even close. She said, it's going to be great, I'm going to publish it, but you have to write it again. So this is now the fall of 2019, and I spend the fall rewriting the novel, and I thought I was okay. I turned it in again in January of 2020, and she turned it down again. And she summoned me to her office. I was so upset that I asked my husband to come with me. And he said, because I wanted him in the room. I really did. And he said, I'm going to come with you, but I'm not going to come upstairs. I'm going to be at the Starbucks across the street. I was so upset. Because I knew I was out of ideas. I was, you know, pick your metaphor. I was banging my head against the wall. I was wandering in the forest. I had nothing. I had nothing. I mean, I had just written a version of this where the Oppenheimer family are on a boat sailing around the world. I mean, it was bad. So I'm in her office. It's January of 2020. And I should also pause to say that I was not in a great place emotionally because, A, I was watching the first impeachment, and I was really upset because we all knew where that was going. And I was paying very close attention to these stories that were coming out of China about this virus, and I'm the kind of person who freaks out about things like viruses in China, and I was really scared. I mean, I was telling people I feel like we're in the opening chapters of The Stand right now, and nobody believed me. That's okay, I really wanted to be wrong. Anyway, I only say this because I was so off balance that day in her office, and I had no idea, I just had no idea where to go with the latecomer, and I suddenly heard myself, I didn't plan this, but I suddenly heard myself telling her, I have this other idea. And I started to tell her about this washed up writer and his awful student and the student's brilliant idea. And I'm just like making this up as I'm going. And she's getting more and more excited. And then we got to the part where I had to tell her what this brilliant plot was that they were all so exercised about. And I knew what it was. I'd figured out what it was. But I was afraid to tell her because she's read every novel in the world, and I was afraid she would say, oh, Jennifer Egan did that, or you know, I don't know, Nathan Englander did that, or something. And I told her, and she went like, and it was so gratifying that I left the office thinking, okay, maybe I'm in real trouble with the latecomer. She's not buying it, but I will write again. I'm not done. And the next day, my agent called me and she said, what just happened? And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, what happened in that meeting? And I said, oh, we talked about what I should do, and I told her about this other idea I had, and she said, Jean, you're getting a 2-book contract. And, I'd never had that before. It just changed everything, that she was willing to say, I believe you can land the latecomer, and I want the other thing too. And then she said, why don't you put down the latecomer? Just step away from
Don't throw it away.
Don't throw it away. Just step away from that book. You need some distance from it, and write that other thing you were telling me about. And then when the lockdown happened a few weeks later, I was just in the right headspace and the right physical space. I was in upstate New York. Also, I was very scared, and also I was very angry. I was very angry at certain people who had allowed this to happen. And it was just like being fired out of a cannon. And I spent 4 months writing the plot, and I finished that book in 4 months, which I'm not, I don't recommend writing a book in 4 months.
But it was a story that had to be told.
I literally did nothing else. My husband, who's also a writer, was working downstairs. I just sat in bed all day and wrote that book. It needed very little revision. And when it was done, I collapsed for a month or two, and then I picked up the manuscript at the latecomer again, and I saw it. I saw what was wrong. I saw the problem, and I saw how to fix it. It was just
incredible just to walk away and then come back and see it.
It really was, and she knew that. I mean, she gave me that. That's
a good editor.
She's a great editor. And when the book finally came out about a month ago, and the reviews, oh my God, they've been amazing. My mother called me and she said, Deb would not let you publish that book until it was right. You owe her so much, and I do.
Right.
So.
And meanwhile, the plot, like, it's on Jimmy Fallon. It gets voted the best novel of the summer. It's.
Yeah, it was
it
was like what Jake experiences in the book.
Exactly.
But I wrote it all myself.
Right.
I came up with the idea. Although it was very funny.
Are you trying to tell us something?
No. They called me and said, "Okay, you're going on the Tonight Show. What do you want to talk to Jimmy about?" I'm like, I don't know. And I said, well, maybe I could tell him about all the things I've been accused of stealing the plot from, because I'd been keeping a list of things that people on Goodreads had accused me of stealing the plot from. And they were just stupid things, like, another book that has a character of a writer who's like, has writer's block and can't write. So I stole the plot from that. But this is a human thing to sort of say, that's fake, and that's stolen, we all do that. So.
especially when it's successful, right? That's when you're kind of, your head is out of the hole and, you know, the guns are loaded.
That's right.
We're going to take, if anybody is interested in asking Jean some questions, I know.
Nothing too hard.
We can continue. Oh, Ginny. Should I just, Mike? You can yell, Ginny.
You're a Jean too?
Ginny.
Oh, Ginny.
Ginny, yes. And I love your books.
Thank you.
And I also love The Undoing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the name.
Yeah, that wasn't the name of the book I wrote, but.
But the book and the show. And I was wondering, thank you. I was wondering just a little bit about that process, if you liked what HBO did. I mean, for me, it was just the greatest gift during COVID.
I've heard that.
Yeah, and watching New York, because I didn't go there for 2 years because of it. Just the scenes and everything they did with it were a wonderful escape. But I was wondering how you felt about that whole process.
Right.
Page
well,
to stage.
I had a book adapted as a film before. My novel Admission became a Tina Fey movie. And I kind of got through all the emotions, all the feels that time around. So that by the time David E. Kelley bought You Should Have Known, and he said, I'm going to be going in a different direction, I was very chill about it. I'd had the vapors with the first one, even though, Admission is a lovely film. It's very sweet. But it's, my book was not a comedy. So just as my book, You Should Have Known, was not a mystery. It's not about who did it. In the book, you know who did it. In fact, the Hugh Grant character, is not even in the book. So he said, what David E. Kelley told me was that he'd read the book when it came out, and he thought the problem with the book as a TV story is that the story kind of decelerates as it goes on. It's really about her. It's about the Nicole Kidman character and how she adapts to a new life, basically. That's not what any of us want in a TV limited series. So he didn't buy it then, but he said he kept thinking about the characters and about the situation. And then he read the book again, and he realized that he could take the characters and the situation and go in a different direction. So he was very upfront about all of this, and I had the Zen lesson of the first one, and I just said, great. And I did not know who did it in the TV show until everybody else did. They had sent us the first 5 episodes early in COVID, because originally it was supposed to come out in May of that year, of 2020. And then, the shutdown affected all of the post-production stuff, so it was delayed until October. And so we'd seen the first 5 episodes, but they would not share that 6th episode. Nobody was allowed to see that 6th episode. So we're sitting down, my husband and I were sitting down to watch it with everybody else. And we said, who do you think did it? And he said, who do you think did it? And we had 2 different people, and they were both wrong. So there you go. But, no complaints. It was, it was an amazing thing to happen to me. And I have heard from people around the world that it meant a lot to them to have something propulsive to talk about and watch every week. So thank David E. Kelley, but yeah, all good. And both the plot and the Latecomer are being developed as well. Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jean?
Tim has one.
Tim, where are you?
There's such a suspense to your writing in general, especially the Latecomer, even though it's not necessarily like a thriller, it's a family drama. There was so much suspense at the end there when the family was going to culminate together. I was on the edge of my seat.
Good.
Do you feel, and all your books I think kind of have that tone. Are you in suspense when you're writing? Do you know where it's, like, are you in as just as much suspense as I am as a reader?
I would say yes. The thing about, I didn't know how the plot was going to end, really. As you write through it, you have this sensation of doors closing as you go, that there now this can't happen, this can't happen, this can't happen because it's too predictable. And eventually you arrive at the final door and it's unexpected, and that's when you know, oh, that's great. As far as the latecomer, I knew the feeling I wanted people to have at the end. And this is where I have to kind of pause and pay homage to one particular novel, which I thought of all through the latecomer, and that is The World According to Garp, which, yeah, the sigh. Everybody sighs when we say this title. This is what I hope for in my whole life, to have people sigh when they hear the name of one of my books, because yes, that was the feeling that I had when I read The World According to Garp, which can also be called a novel about a family, of course. That feeling of fulfillment and satisfaction at the end of that novel, where everything comes down in the right place, is so rare and so precious. And
optimistic.
It's optimistic, but remember, he kills everybody. In the final pages, everybody dies.
Right.
I mean, and yet you're right. You have this feeling of deep pleasure and happiness. Even though, like, he kills everybody. But
I did feel, and I think that's true in your last book, in that, like, oh, it's resolved. They see each other and they love each other.
Yeah.
They really see each other because they weren't seeing each other.
They didn't have the whole story.
Yeah, and that there's a lot of forgiveness, and to see that resentment kind of just fade.
But Harrison's still an asshole. Sorry.
He's a prick. I agree. But I think you needed him, right?
Yeah. I mean, his chapters were the most fun to write.
Oh, I'm sure.
Loved writing his chapters.
And they all had, the other three agreed that Harrison was, this arrogant.
Yeah. From conception, he was just like that. He becomes this. Oh, we're getting signaled. He becomes this kind of right-wing ideologue, the kind you see on certain news programs, telling us all how to live our lives.
On certain networks.
Hey, he is who he is.
The one thing is it something in terms of the myth of the family? I mean, tell me a little bit about you and your family. I mean, was there struggle? Did you have a hard time finding your place within that?
Not so much. I mean, I feel so incredibly fortunate because I came from, even though my family were not artists, they valued art.
Okay.
And when I kind of went in that direction early, and they saw that I wanted to be a writer, they understood that it would be hard, but they did not I mean, my dad, who unfortunately died in January, was a doctor, and he would have loved for me to be a doctor, and he got very excited in 4th grade because I became obsessed with the Andromeda strain. And he thought, great, score, she's going to go to medical school. But I just wanted to write the novel. Right. I didn't want to go to medical school. And
you knew
Michael
that
Crichton had gone to medical school, and he had ended up being a writer. So.
But you knew that. You knew you were a storyteller.
I mean, I would have loved to have been able to give my dad something like that he really wanted, but it was just not to be.
Yeah, well, your books are certainly a gift.
Yeah, when he died, he was right in the middle of reading The Galley at the Latecomer, and I saw exactly where his bookmark was. So he didn't make it through the final draft. But he had read the bad earlier drafts. So anyway, he loved the plot, and yeah. So very fortunate, very, very fortunate that way.
What's next? Is this the breakdown time?
This is totally the breakdown time. I mean, I have just signed another 2-book contract, so I have to write two more books. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try to write a sequel to The Plot next, which should be really interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
there's more there. I can see that there's more there.
Yeah, there's more. But if I may, my job this summer is to be a stage mom, because my son's first musical, which he is an actor, but he wrote, composed, and he wrote the book Music and Lyrics, is in rehearsal in New York City right now, and I'm going to be in the theater every night. I'm going to be bawling in the back seat. I'm so ridiculously proud that literally that is what is next for me. If you want to find me, I'll be
where
on
you'll
22nd Street in New York City every single night. That's
How
where I'll be.
exciting. Wow.
Yeah. So if you're in New York this summer, come see it.
It has been such a delight to meet you and
too.
to talk with you, and most importantly, to read your work.
Thanks.
It's really been fun. So thanks for being part of the
and
BookFest.
thanks everybody for coming.